Get started here in just a second. Quiets down so easily. We got a couple seats up front here. A couple over here on the right as well.
He's looking out for us.
Look at that. Perfect. Thank you everyone for coming to the EC the day after a holiday. I know how hard it probably was to get out of bed this morning, Memorial Day. We really appreciate it. Thank you to XMI Human Resource Solutions for the support in all these events. This is a monthly series we do the last Tuesday of every month at 8 a.m. where we are lucky enough to get to interview a local CEO, and these are some of my favorite events to do. Today we have Lewis Upkins here. If everyone wants to help me welcome Lewis up front with me. Thank you. Just commenting on how you were probably the best dressed entrepreneur we've ever interviewed.
I don't know about that. If you want to know how I became the best dressed entrepreneur, let me tell you the funny story from this morning.
There we go.
This is a great opening.
Yep.
This was not intentional. So this morning like most entrepreneurs, you plan and you have to have a backup plan, right? So I planned to get up early this morning, go to the dry cleaners, get my clothes, get dressed, suit and tie, see you guys at 7:30. Well, I do that. I get to the dry cleaners, and the lady comes to the front, and she says, "Mr. Upkins, I do not have your clothes ready." And so I thought, surely you're not telling me this. Do you have a shirt ready? No, sir. Do you have a sport coat ready? No, sir. Do you have pants ready? No, sir. I thought, okay, I'm in traffic. Now I have to make a U-turn and go all the way back home, get dressed, and make it here on time. So I did that. Called my little daughter, who was 11, and woke her up. And I said, "Zoe, Daddy's going to need some help when I get home." So I need you to be downstairs, open the door, pull a few shirts, pull the jacket, and put me together. So there you have it.
So your stylist is 11.
My stylist is 11.
Which is
She's
great.
an entrepreneur, by the way. She'll charge me later.
Yeah, right. So let's start with a quick bio of yourself,
Sure.
kind of how you got to where you are today.
Great. Well, that's a long question. I mean, that's a long answer. But I would say simply my story is probably like many of you and probably unlike some of you. My story really came out of a place of pain and really out of a place of just desperation. I grew up in Nashville. Family was going through a terrible divorce. I was a student at TSU and working 3 full-time jobs, an engineering student. And it was not fun. And I basically was thinking, Lord, okay, I've got to figure something out. I can't keep this cycle. And so I began to look around at our school, and I noticed that our fraternities and sororities always had new T-shirts every week. I thought, I'm an artist. How about I design those shirts, and I sell those shirts, and I make the money, and I can quit a job. And so I met with one of the sororities. They gave me an opportunity. I went down the street from our school, which was the College Crib, which is still there today, and met with the owner and said, "Hey, I can design shirts for you for $20 a T-shirt design." She said, "Absolutely, you're really, really talented." So I started designing for her, and quickly, while in class, I would design 10 shirts at a time, just freehand, just. And I thought, I'm making money now, making money now. And it all kind of came to a crash maybe 4 weeks into this relationship where I recognized that, went down to pick up a check, and she had one of my shirts in the window, and she was charging $25 for the shirt. One-on-one lesson. I said, she's paying me 20, she's getting 25 over and over and over. And I thought, this is not going to work for me. So at that time, there was a thing called the Yellow Pages. So I opened the Yellow Pages and I said, where can I buy blank T-shirts and where can I get T-shirts printed? I'll print my own designs and my own shirts, and I'll quit one of these jobs or 2 of these jobs or 3 of these jobs. And I'll start my own T-shirt company. And so that was the beginning of that. And actually within probably 4 weeks after that, I decided I'm going to quit all these jobs and I'm going to start my company. And that was the beginning of it.
Fantastic. So that was at TSU?
It was at TSU.
Are you still printing T-shirts?
No.
That's a tough gig.
No, that was a fun gig though. But it grew to a pretty significant business, and we ended up doing T-shirts for all professional sports and entertainment and major ministries, so the NFL, NASCAR, Major League Baseball, So it went from just the college sororities and fraternities to pretty significant private label company.
What was like, because the early days, that's what entrepreneurs consider the grind. What was the hardest part of that?
I would say the hardest part for me was just not giving up. I think I had kind of a motto that failure wasn't an option, and I really gave myself unrealistic timelines. When I decided it was on a Wednesday that I was going to just start this t-shirt company, I gave myself till Sunday, which I didn't have the Entrepreneur Center to help me. So I gave myself till Sunday to get these shirts printed. The following week, if I sold them all, then I was going to be in business, and there was never looking back. And so I'd say the continuous struggle of not giving up, and then probably more importantly, not having mentors. I didn't have mentors at that time to support me in the business. I didn't really have a business plan. I didn't have bank financing. Didn't have anything. So it was really build a company, take the earnings, reinvest it, reinvest it back into the company.
Bootstrapping. So you kind of made a set of shirts and went out and said, if we can validate this in a week, I'll be good to go.
Simply did that, and it sounds a lot easier today than it was then, but I'll tell you, here's my business plan. I had $300. I had one t-shirt idea. It was a time when President Reagan had just started the Just Say No to Drugs program. So I came up with the slogan, children need hugs, not drugs, and decided I'll take this to every elementary school and high school in this nation, as far as I can drive my little car at that time. And I would basically take the same t-shirt design and repurpose it with their colors and their mascot on it and sell it to the schools. And then that basically evolved pretty quickly. And as it was, I guess I'd say now it was probably planned, but one of the companies I was working for at the time was the National Baptist Publishing Board, which is the oldest African-American publishing board in the country. And one of the mistakes that the founder made, or the grandson of the founder made, was that he shared with us a video about how this company was created. And it was simply this. It was created by a slave, and they would show this at chapel. So it was created by a slave who was uneducated. And he created this publishing company, and then he also simultaneously created a bank. Well, both of those institutions still exist today. It's Citizens Bank, Citizens Bank on Jefferson Street, and it's the National Baptist Publishing Board. So I'm sitting there as a young 17, 18-year-old kid, and I'm looking at this, I'm saying to myself, if a slave can do this, what's my excuse? I'm out of here. So I thought, I gotta go. So if I'm working in a building that a slave created, I've got to get out of here. It's motivation.
That's a great motivation. So from there, kind of snowballed and evolved, and then you find yourself with all these diverse projects.
Well, it kind of evolved in a really weird way. Again, I wouldn't say it was strategic or anything of that nature. It was really a common set of events. So from that early humble beginning, basically what happened within probably a 9-month period, my mom and my father both thought I'd lost my mind because I'd quit school, and at this point I've quit school, I've started making money, I've quit 3 jobs, and I'm doing things that neither one of them are totally in agreement with. But they are like, Lewis, you've always been a little entrepreneur, but we're going to support you, but we're not really happy about this, but we're going to give you an option to come to your senses and come back to school and do all these great things. And so several months in, I began to tell my mom, I said, I really feel like I'm going to do something with music people. So she really thought I lost my mind at that point. And I couldn't explain it. It was just an intuition that I felt, there was something that I was scheduled to do. And so I was in the mall one day at Hickory Hollow Mall, all these little Nashville spots. And a gentleman stopped me. He said, where'd you get that t-shirt? And I said, I designed it. He said, can you design a tour jacket? I said, absolutely, I can. And I'd never designed a tour jacket. And so he gave me his information. He said, how much would you charge me? And I said, well, tour jackets I normally charge $1,000. Well, I'd never done a tour jacket. But I just knew that was the right price for him. And at that time, there was this national landmark down on Broadway called Tony Lamo, or whatever his name is. All the studs and rhinestones and just really kind of a cheesy jacket. Well, he wanted that. And he wanted airbrush on it. He wanted all these details. And I thought, man, this is going to take me forever. I got to make my money out of this. So I designed the jacket for him, and lo and behold, he was the lead guitarist for a group called BB and CC Winans, which were, gospel greats and Grammy Award winners. And so BB saw the jacket and simply said, man, who designed that jacket? He said, oh, this little kid from Nashville. Next thing I get a call from BB, would you design jackets for us? Yes. I was on the road, and that was it. Wow. That was the start of it. And then that evolved into, working with people like Streisand and Whitney and Oprah and just, a variety of people like that. So it just...
That's amazing. So how was it working with Oprah?
I would say Oprah is probably one of the most fantastic leaders I've ever worked with. Very humble organization, very smart, very efficient, very trusting, and very kind. They're a very kind organization. It's really interesting because when you work with someone like Oprah and you see the level of both care for people that she has, and then you meet a general local production company that treats you really, really bad, it's really funny because it's like, guys, the best don't act like this. Why are you acting like this?
Sure.
But I would say that what I've learned from her and what it was like working with her was always a privilege. I mean, just a fantastic person. We still work together.
Fantastic. So let's fast forward and talk about the book you have out. It's very family-centric. At what point in your career did you kind of realize that was, the most important part to you?
That's a great question. I think probably about, I'd say 7 years ago, it really became crystal clear to me. It was always a pain point. Obviously, I started the story by my parents, about my parents, but about 7 years ago, I'd seen a pattern consistently with corporations, of leaders within corporations or entrepreneurs, and I thought, this is just not all right. I mean, why is this okay and acceptable that we can be extremely successful and we just cannot make it work at home? And so I began to really just study that pattern, and I saw just some very consistent things, and it was simply that we put a lot of value on the stuff, and we didn't put a lot of value on the people that we were working for, for the stuff, meaning our families, our spouses, our children, our friends, or whomever. And I just began to think about, one of the things that when people ask you about legacy, they ask you, what is it going to look like in the future? What does it look like for you today? Well, in order for your future to look like you hope that it would look, you have to start doing those things today. And so one of the things that was really, really obvious for me is that I didn't want to make the same mistake that I saw my father make as it relates to our family. And I thought if there's anything I can do to help prevent that for other people, I wanted to, kind of tap into that as well. So it's a real true passion for me, period.
Awesome, fantastic. Does anyone have any questions so far? There we go. John Paul?
John Paul. Well, I would say, first of all, I wouldn't say I have all the answers, but I would say that for me, I really placed a strong emphasis on values, on what I value, and I value my family. And I think in business, we put a real strong emphasis on our customers and our revenue, and we value that. And so I think when you put a mirror and you simply say, I have a skill set to show what value looks like. I know how to serve a customer well. I know how to communicate well. I know how to ask for feedback well. You do all these things because there's an exchange of values. And I simply just kind of flipped it and said, what if you did for your family at a minimum what you would do for your business? Use the same skill sets. You don't have to get a PhD to do it. Just value them at a minimum the way you would value your most important customer.
There's a saying out there, and this is interesting. It says, you can have a career, a family, or friends. Choose two. What do you think about that?
I'd change it.
Change it.
I'd say you can have a family and a career. Choose both.
There you go. Okay. So what are your current projects you're working on?
The most exciting project I'm working on right now is called Well Placed Smile.
Okay.
And Caroline Hips, there in the bright pink, that will make you all smile. We are working on what I believe to be one of the most significant projects. We're building in the Gulch. We'll be opening here in the next couple months. But it's really focused around the 12 most important categories of one's life, specifically those that are focused on intentional living. So it focuses on the 12 Most important categories: your health and fitness, your finance, your career, your parenting, your love relationship, your intellectual life, your emotional life, your spiritual life, and then your life vision. And what we see there is that one of the companies that I'm a partner in is called Giant, and we do the world's largest one-day leadership event. But with this, we have found that people don't plan for life. They plan for business. They plan for vacation. They plan for retirement, but they don't plan for all of it. And so this is something that we've put a lot of time and attention into, and really looking forward to serving this community with it.
So it's a brick and mortar location.
Oh, yes.
And what's your target demographic for people to serve?
Anyone who, I would say pretty much our target demographic would be 18 to 99.
Okay.
I want to catch you before you dip over.
So anybody that wants a plan for life.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting location you picked. Why did you pick the Gulch now, as opposed to, I'd imagine 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't have picked that spot?
I would have.
You would have?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I like to find things that, I remember when we first found the spot, everyone wasn't in agreement. They thought, oh, that's a little edgy spot. But I think about the future, and I'm always thinking about the future. And I think about, you know, the number of houses and residents and how Nashville is moving back to the city. And I think more importantly, that demographic that's around the Gulch is our consumer. And so we want to be where the action is. We want to be in close proximity where growth is happening within the city. And so it's a very strategic destination for us. And so being, you know, less than a mile from the convention center, being less than a mile from the Nashville Visitors Bureau, being less than a mile from the EC Center.
Sure.
All these things are very strategic for us.
And when's the grand opening again?
We haven't put a date down for the grand opening, but it'll be August.
It'll be August?
Soft opening.
So you've seen Nashville transition. You've been here for a little while. Tell us about what you've seen and how you maybe see that going forward.
You know, I was raised in Nashville. So what I've seen for Nashville is I've seen Nashville turn into what it has always been. It's a great place to live. And people, when I was touring with, you know, with Whitney and people like that, and people would always laugh at me and say, man, why do you live in that little country city? And I would always say, because it's the perfect pace. It's the perfect pace. And that I love the quality of people that we have here. And I think that what Nashville is now being recognized for is its natural DNA. Nashville is made of entrepreneurs, and it's made of great people. It's made of people that have morals and values, and they love family, and it's a healthcare community, it's a sports community, it has 21 plus colleges in the city. It's a great city, so there's a lot of energy, and I think more importantly, it's an entrepreneurial hub. And so I think with the low cost of living, or the average cost of living, the education, I think Nashville is kind of a mecca for a lot of great things to happen. And when I look to the future, I see Nashville as a city that many of our nation will follow. They will look at Nashville and say, Nashville did something right. You know, when I think about globally, I think people will point back to Nashville and say, that's what a great leader looks like. Because when you think about the leaders and the grandfathers of the city and those to come, there's one thing that's consistent about leadership in the city, and that is our leaders are not these people that are swole up and reading their accolades and telling you how great they are. We have humble leaders, and I think that that's powerful. So that's what I see for Nashville.
Fantastic. Yeah, let's open up for a couple more. That's intense.
I see Michael Burcham as our mayor.
I don't think that's a top. I don't know if that's a topic that Michael wants to get into. Do you have any comment?
He's smart.
No public comment. Michael is the mayor of the EC.
He is. He's my mayor. He's my new mayor.
There we go. Don?
So with respect to Lifebook, that's the brand that will do the 12 steps. That's not my father. Let me clarify. So as it relates to my father was an entrepreneur as well, still is. And my father had fourth grade education, moved to the South as a construction worker, and basically decided on a job after getting a $10,000 bonus for the year after he'd made the company $100 million, that this wasn't going to work for him anymore. And so he started his little construction company and grew that significantly and sold it after 30 plus years. But in that process, one of the things that I saw in my father, many great things that I recognized in my father, but the one thing was that at the expense of all that greatness, he lost way with the family. And that was the thing that really was the catalyst of me really looking at life and saying, it's okay to have significance and it's okay to have success, but it's not okay to destroy those that are closest to you along the way to have that. And so that was just kind of an aha for me as a young kid, watching that, experiencing that, and then really trying to plan around that. Because it's easy for any of us. I mean, we see it consistently in this space where people just knock it out the park, and for whatever reason, they take, the other part of their life for granted. And so I just wanted to be very intentional around that. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We don't spend a lot of time in the EC talking about the other side, but everyone here goes home and has families and has their other things to worry about. So it's cool to hear that perspective on that. John Paul, you got another one?
John Paul is loading them up today. Thank you. I think for me, and I think what I would recommend to anyone, I think is to tap into what matters to you. And then that way it's authentic. So, if technology is your thing, or if healthcare is your thing, or HR is your thing, whatever it is, then I think you find that natural passion because it matters to you. And I think for me, what has always mattered is, great leaders, great creativity, doing things that are changing people's lives every single day. So even with the artists that I was fortunate enough to work with, at the time, all of these people were the best of class. And it was just amazing to watch, take a creative process and then turn it into a show and watch someone who's exchanged their currency to come see that show, and you give them more than they could have ever expected. And the same thing was even when I was doing the t-shirts. Early on, I made some guidelines and I said, okay, this is the kind of work I'm going to do, and this is the kind of work I'm not going to do. And I was challenged even in that. So I'll give you two examples. One example was I decided early, even when I was broke as the Ten Commandments, I said, there's certain stuff I'm not going to do. So I was challenged early on with a client who said, hey, we want you to do these. Do you guys remember those old satin jackets that were just like the roller derby groups that, So anyway, so a guy asked me to do those jackets, and I thought, absolutely not. And he was going to give me a big purchase order, and as a small company, you want to take all business. But I was honest with myself. I said, if I take this purchase order, I'm going to get more customers like that. And I don't want those customers. I don't want to do that kind of work. So I said no to that. Now, fast forward, I still was, grinding and, new business and taking on companies, but really evaluating, if I look down the road, what do I want more of and what do I want none of? And so one of the other things is I'd made an early decision and kind of set up a framework was I didn't want to take on any client that I couldn't sit down at some point with my grandmother, my mother, my future wife, and my daughter and say, hey, I did that. And that was very, very real for me. And so at one of the toughest times in our business, and we couldn't even make payroll on this week, I received a call from, at the time, a very famous rapper. And this gentleman said, hey, we've heard about you, we've seen all your work, we'd love to have you do work with us. And they were going to offer me $500,000 purchase order per month doing their merch. $500,000 per month doing their merch. And so I asked the guy, and I didn't listen to a lot of rap, and I said, tell me a little bit about your music. Tell me what you guys talk about. He said, oh, it's great, and he sent me over his bio, and it talked about all this stuff they were doing with the Boys and Girls Club and all this great stuff. And I said, well, tell me, do you call women bees, and do you call them this? And he said, oh, yeah, dog, it's like, I was like, well, I said, no disrespect. I said, you're probably going to think I'm crazy, but I'm going to pass on this. And he said, what do you mean? Are you crazy? I said, no, I'm not crazy. I'm just going to pass. I said, it's not something that I want to benefit from. And I said, you know, candidly, I said, I spend my weekends at the time. This is when Joe Johnston housing projects were still there, where Marathon Village and all that stuff was. And we would go there every weekend and basically knock on doors just to get the kids out of the projects and just try to mentor them. And, you know, part of the biggest challenge in doing that was we were also had to befriend the dope boys, either be shot by them or befriend them. And so I said, you know, I spend my weekends trying to take out of kids what you're putting into kids. And thank you. And I said, I know that they would never know that I've done this, but I know. So I think at the end of the day, you know, you got to know what you'll stand for. You got to be authentic to yourself. Money is going to come 1,000 different ways, but you have to be able to say yes to the right things and no to the wrong things, period. And there's no compromise in that. So.
Yeah. Sherman?
Yeah, I'll tell you that, you know, I did not have the privilege of having quote-unquote systems in place at that time. What we really focused on was really the silos that we wanted more of. And so when I looked at professional sports, I said I want the best in professional sports, which will attract every other brand. So we got the NFL, then we got the NBA, and women's NBA, collegiate, all the above. We went after merchandise for artists. We got the best in that space, which attracted everyone else. So the way our plan was simply this. Our beachhead had to be the best. And with the best, it attracted the best. And so that was really it. That was our social proof and our social strategy, if you would.
Let's go back to the very beginning. You talked about, you know, how you had to overcome financial hurdles, and I think that's the biggest problem we hear at the EC is, you know, how do we get over the bootstrap? You know, how do we get, you know, when the capital investment's not there? What are some tips on that?
You know, I would say today I would handle that totally different, but I'd say back then, you know, probably the greatest challenge was, and planning for it was, you weren't always going to have these great customers. At least that was my thought. So I would basically take whatever earnings I had and put it away, and continue to put it away, and act as if that purchase order didn't happen, and mentally put it away, and just put it away. And so that prepared us for the cycles, because as a new entrepreneur, I didn't understand what the sales cycles were going to be. Also, when we began to transition our business from, you know, from the entertainment space, because it was really iffy and tours would cancel and all this kind of stuff. And so I said, hey, I need to focus on a more stable customer. So we began to move to corporate merchandising, and in that space, we were able to advance and scale our business, you know, a lot smarter than it was with the sizzle stuff. But the interesting thing was we were able to leverage and monetize the sizzle because corporate wanted the sizzle. Mm-hmm. So then I began to create brand partnerships with these two people that needed to talk to one another, because HP needed to talk to Whitney Houston, mm-hmm. or Nike needed to talk with so-and-so. So I began to offer that as another business solution within our company, and that just continued to expand.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think so.
What'd you say?
I said, make it sound easy.
It's not easy. It's never easy, and I think that's a thing.
Easy, it would be fun.
Well, I think it's this, guys. I mean, you think about who's here today. I mean, you're doing something that no one else is doing. You're up at 7:30 the day after Memorial, and you're going to get what no one else is going to get in a few years. And it's the sacrifice. It's putting in the time and putting the energy. It's not easy. It sounds easy when you tell the story. But I bet you wouldn't have wanted to ride with me 20 years ago with my roof on my car hanging down, and I'm hiring my college roommates. I had a 1-bedroom apartment. You know, when I got my first big purchase order, I had a 1-bedroom apartment, and I hired 2 football players. And I said, okay, guys, you're working for me. I fed them, I gave them a check, I fed them Frosty Flakes, and we had an aisle from my bedroom to the bathroom to the kitchen to the door. Everything else was T-shirts. And I was like, you got to fold these shirts better than anybody else in the industry. You got to label these better than anybody in the industry. I mean, we just set standards. And that was it. It's not easy. So don't hear that. It's hard.
Kimberly?
Well, obviously you have to be a licensee for the NFL, but a lot of that attraction came through merch that they saw design, and they began to seek us out. So we never really had to go seek and find, but once we were engaged, I think the Olympics really opened up a big door for us. We did a lot of the merch for the Olympics for three of the 90, what was it, 96, 92? I can't remember the years now.
96.
Yeah, all the 90s. So you have to have a formalized agreement, licensing agreement with them. But even in that space, it's still very iffy. I mean, the brand sounds better than the product sometimes. And I'll give you an example. In the NFL, they had 3,000 licensees at the time, and they had really gotten really cluttered and cloudy with their brand. It had no value. I mean, you could get an NFL product at any local, gas station. And so the NFL came in and decided we need to clean up all of this. So they reduced it from 3,000 to 300. And then they reduced it, and we made that cut. Then they reduced it from 300 to 30, and we made that cut. Then they reduced it from 30 to 10, and we made that cut.
Wow. We
We were the only ones independent that were still in the cut. Everything else competing against us was Nike, Adidas, Puma, all these brands. And
What did you do to make that cut from 3,000?
prayed a lot.
Did you take certain actions along the way?
No, I mean, they were doing the evaluation. So they were evaluating you based off your brand, based off your activity, based off your return on investment, based off your sell-through within stores, all these different factors. But what they were really getting down to, where they were shaking it up because they wanted to get a big check from one of the corporate partners to say, you're exclusive. And that's essentially what they ended up doing. And so after the 10th cut, we just looked at it and we said, hey, we can't compete. We can't compete with a Nike. We can't compete with an Adidas. So let's shift our business again and find another core sweet spot. And that's when we shifted to the churches. We went to the mega churches and said, okay, we can be the best in the business in this space, private label their large events, do all this stuff, and still keep our earnings up. So part of the other thing I'd say to you as entrepreneurs is be able to be shifty. You're gonna have to be shifty.
Kimberly, hold on just a second. Did he answer your question? Okay, real quick.
You know, I'm not sure at this point. We've been out of that business for a while. I'm not sure what the licensing arrangements are now. Historically, you could not. Historically, you had to be an official licensee to do licensee product.
I know collegiate you can. I actually ran a much less successful t-shirt company than Lewis.
He was bootlegging.
Yeah, it just paid for beer in college. But collegiate, you can go through a licensee and sell product.
I was just wondering, as when you were saying to be able to shift, and as you were expanding things, and you said that you were starting to add to your services as a company, making those introductions from Nike to, either a sportsperson or a musician or something like that. Did you keep everything under the same company head, or did you expand to different company names or things?
We did a little bit of both based on the product. So we started a film and television division, which became Delia Listo and Upkins, and then we had the branding stuff, which we kept under our current company, but it just depended on what it was and what was the right structure for that relationship.
As a follow-up, as you expanded those different departments, what was your role in that for the different departments?
Janitor.
Cleaning it up.
No, just kidding. No, my role was, I pretty much kept the same role, which was, I was the relationship guy and I was a creative guy. So I would see the big vision and I'd bring the team in to execute it. But I spent most of my time building the relationships out away from the office.
Fantastic. So I know you said that failure is not an option, but as entrepreneurs, we learn through our failures. Business-wise, what was your biggest failure? Or what was your biggest, they asked Marcus Whitney this one time, what was the dumbest thing you've ever done? I thought that was a great question because it really teaches, what was your biggest
Dumbest
failure?
thing I've ever done?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, there's so many. I think, gosh, let me think about that for a second. Oh, Lord. The dumbest thing I've ever done.
In relation to business.
Okay. That makes it a little easy. As it relates to business.
That's why we love this question.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't sit here and say that I'm, the most intelligent person in the world. I'd probably say if when I look back at my life and I think about the options that were available to me, I probably would say, on one hand, I would say it was probably the smartest thing I've ever done, and on the other hand, I'd say it's probably the dumbest thing I've ever done, and that's probably when I chose to walk away from my education.
Walk away from
My education as a junior engineering student at TSU. When I look back at that, and I think about now having kids and the value of education, I feel a sense of Dad needs to go back and finish that in order to be able to continue to say what I say to my children, because that's a place of tension for me.
Wow.
Not that I need an engineering degree, but at the same time, I feel like it's not quite fair for me to say, you're going to school and you're going to school, when they can say, Dad, you didn't finish school. And so that would be, if I could do it over, that would be one thing I would continue to do that, have that degree, just so I could have this conversation.
Sure.
Differently.
So your son, he's an all-star basketball player,
Mm-hmm.
speaks 4 languages,
Mm-hmm.
he's an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
If he ever makes that decision, what do you do?
I have to support him. I mean, and that's the thing that I have to be prepared for, is that I see me in both of our children. Both of our kids are entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And my daughter specifically, I know, is going to challenge me on that one, because she brings it up all the time. All the time. She does. And so if I could do that part again, I probably would have couched my life differently just to complete that. I was a straight A student.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I just I couldn't reconcile with the value of what I saw in my classroom. Most of the teachers that were teaching in business had never been in business. The engineers that I interned with were miserable. And so, I was observant, and I would look at these guys and think, man, he's 40 years old. He hates his job. Why should I give 20 years of my life to be him? Mm-hmm. And that's what I was wrestling with as a young kid. And at the same time, I'm trying to, I've got to make a life for myself, and I have to do something that's true to me.
Yeah.
So that's a long answer to you.
I think if that ever comes to it too, luckily there's a lot of resources today that maybe didn't exist then.
Yeah.
That would help, places like this one out. But his daughter sells lemonade for $5 a cup, so that's
And she gets it.
Yeah.
I was telling him this funny story that she likes to sell lemonade for $5 a cup. And I said, Zoe, you can't do this. Nobody's going to buy this. And she said, oh, Dad, they're going to buy it. Watch. And I said, well, everything's about location. So we get in our community, and we're right by the swim pool area. And so she sets up her little desk and her chalkboard, and she writes it boldly, $5. And I said, Zoe, how can you justify this? She said, well, a cookie and a cup of lemonade is $5. I said, okay, I'm going to help you. And so we get down there, and in 30 minutes, she's made $75. And but that's the beginning of the smartness of Miss Zoe. Then she goes to the pool, and she recruits 2 girls that are in the pool swimming to come out and sell the lemonade, and she turns around and goes swimming. She's outsourced her help. So
I think she'll be all right. Let's open up for a couple more questions. Nathan?
where do I see?
Like, where do you see value in going to college?
I think there's a lot of value there. I mean, I think that I think there's a lot of baseline knowledge that one can get from college. I think that there are great business schools. I think that there are schools now that focus on entrepreneurs. They didn't know what to call me when I was in school. It was either you majored in business and you were planning to go work for someone, but you didn't major in business and go work for yourself. They didn't have that. And so I would say there's a lot of value for the collegiate experience and business schools.
Let's go 3 more questions. Don?
Expanding on what Don was saying earlier, so in business life, if you had something that you identified, you got excited about,
Yes, I've had those. Oh gosh, I've had 2 of those. So one was in the early part of my career with the design and branding thing. I had a gentleman, very charismatic, who wanted to buy us, and for probably 3 years, he just pursued and pursued and pursued. And he was very, very wealthy, and they were based out of Florida, and we were a match for their company. They had a large agency, but they didn't have our customer base, and so we were a perfect blend for them. And I was a new father, I was a new husband, all the above, and so this guy, he continued to pursue with all the, take you on a, deep dive trip, and I want to take you here, and I want to take you there, and I just kept saying no to all these things. And finally, I said, I'll entertain this, but I want to spend some time with your people before I take any practical steps. And so I went down to his office. They had 7 or 8 different locations at the time, and so I spent time with all of his staff. And you can tell he obviously gave them the, we have someone in the office, be nice today kind of story. And so coming away from that, I didn't have a total peace, but I was looking at it through the wrong set of lenses. I was looking at it as a father and as a new husband and as a, here's a sense of security. And he wanted to offer a pretty significant number for this company. And so I talked to attorneys, I talked with, a few people that I trusted, and I said, what are your thoughts? And they said, well, we think it's the right fit for you, and we think you should do it. And I said, well, I'm not convinced of that. So here's what I'd like to recommend, and what do you think about this? And so I simply made a recommendation that I had a contingency where I wanted to live with them for just a little bit, and then we trigger the transaction, which this is not normal business, but this is what I put in place with our attorneys. And I'm so glad I did, because probably 30 days into this newfound relationship, what I found was there was zero integrity within the organization. The leadership had zero integrity, and I took 4 trips down to Florida when he wasn't in town to meet with the staff and to watch how they handle customers. And not to gross you out, but I'd literally vomit on the plane coming back each time. And the 4th time I told my wife, I said, you know what, honey, I don't care how much money they have. I don't want to be a part of this. They're not good people. And so she was in agreement with me. We walked away from millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I was okay with that. I was like, I'd rather have me and have a good name than to have that and be a part of that. And so it was from a financial standpoint, it was a little disappointing, but I was very, very, very pleased with the ability to say no to something that wasn't right. And so, and you'll have those. You'll have that. That'll come where you'll look at someone from a DNA, you'll say, we're a match, we're fit, but it doesn't always work. So I've had 2 of those.
2 more? Willie?
That wasn't inspirational. It might be for you, it wasn't for me. It was heartbreaking. Yeah, I am too. I'm going to invest in her. I'm sorry?
His question was, who is Lewis impressed with currently in the marketplace? Maybe Nashville, maybe somewhere else that he looks at for inspiration.
There's 2 people that I love. Southwest Airlines is my favorite, and they've been my favorite since they started. In fact, I used to get ridiculed when I was on tour because I would fly Southwest to get home, and they would, oh, you're going to ride your bus home? It's like, yeah, I'm going to ride my bus home, save some money while you guys drive in first class in American Airlines and all this good stuff. But I love their innovation. I love their authenticity to who they are and the brand value that they deliver. They've stayed true to themselves. They're the most profitable. They have fun. They made traveling fun. So I love the innovation around that brand. I also highly respect Howard Schultz with Starbucks. I love his philosophy of failing fast. We've had the privilege of working with them, and one of the things that he's a stickler about is looking at an opportunity to fail. That's okay, and learning from those failures and having famous failures. And so as a result of those failures, we're experiencing now some of the best products. The coffee in the grocery stores, the oatmeal, both of those came from interns while they were failing and going through a transition. And so when I look at the ability and the courage to look at a business opportunity and say, okay, this may not work. I'm not going to judge you for it. I'm not going to throw you under the bus for it. Dream with me. I love that. I respect that. And so when you can give that permission to your staff or to yourself or to your constituents to dream with you and be okay if it doesn't work, I think you get innovation. And so those two brands I love. I also love Oprah. I still love what she's doing. She's building something that's different than what she had, and she's also experienced some tough growth, but she's consistent in that she's going to continue to grow, and we're seeing the results of that. So.
Last question. Who wants it? Somebody's got to have it. Beth.
Thanks for sharing your story today. It seems like as you've grown over the years since you started, you always seem to use the same sort of filtering system to identify good opportunities from bad opportunities. Like, do you have a piece about it? Are they good people? Is that what you would attribute your success to, is having that internal piece about the
I would
things that
say
you're supposed to do?
200%, yes. I think at the end of the day, you have to be able to sleep with yourself at night, and you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm okay with what I've done today and how I've spent my time. And when I think about life, I think about life in this context that I have one life to live. I want to live it well. I want to live it with some joy, and I want to spend it with people that I enjoy being with. And so, the great thing about being an entrepreneur is that you get to choose your customers. You get to choose the headaches that you take on. There are people that you can just simply say, you're not a fit for us. We don't want that level of stress, or we don't want that level of anxiety within our organization. And so I think as an entrepreneur, that's one of the great benefits, just looking at a customer or looking at an organization and saying, are they a fit for us? Step away from the purchase order and just say, are they a fit for us? Would we enjoy being in relationships with them? And if so, then you find the opportunity to find a marriage. But if not, you have the opportunity to walk away and find someone who's a better match for you. So I would say yes, that's been one thing for me personally, is that I've really tried to look at the opportunity and think through it beyond just the financial opportunity. Just think through it all the way through. Is this someone I want to spend my time with? And when I find that to not be true, then I have the ability to make that decision as well, which we all do. Is sometimes we have to fire our customers, sometimes we have to fire ourselves, and just say, this is not working for me.
Awesome. Let's do a little short recap. I'll do it. Sometimes the best stories come from stories of pain. Lewis is a firm believer that failure is not an option. And use your surroundings for motivation in relation to, and I believe it's T.H. Boyd, is that correct? The publishing house? R.H. Boyd, sorry. Which is also in our Hall of Fame, so a great connection there. As far as family goes, value people, not stuff. I think that's a great lesson right there. Focus on the future, always. Be authentic with yourself. It's not easy. It's always a sacrifice. It's very easy to talk back on it, but during it, it's definitely a sacrifice. And then it's always good to find inspiration, no matter how successful you are. Failing fast is a great inspiration with Starbucks. Lewis, give us, as EC tradition, 3 deliverables for everyone to go out this week. Short week, but 3 deliverables they can work on and to help them get to everyone's goals.
3 deliverables. Teacher. I would simply say, number 1, be a leader worth following. I think we all have the desire to build a business, and would hope that someone would come and support us in that vision. But be a leader worth following. If someone was to study you, if someone was to clone you, let it be something good. I would say, secondly, I'd say build a culture that's different, meaning that the things that society tends to tell you that are the only way that you can do something, or the only person that can do something, I would say be that difference that you want to see. So simply meaning that if you are a female entrepreneur, if you're a minority, if you are the majority, whatever, just be a good person. Just be a good person that people want to speak well of and want to work with. Lastly, I would say do something that makes the city proud. We have all the cameras on this city right now, and I think for the next 10 to 20 years, there'll be a lot of magical stories that will come out of this EC Center. Be one of those stories. There you have it.
Fantastic. Help me thank Lewis. One quick note, because it's important for the city, and Michael would hurt me if I didn't mention it, is that Steve Case is coming here with his Revolution bus tour. He made an audible because he was so impressed with Nashville and the EC at Google Demo Day that he's coming here June 27th, and he's going to give someone at the EC $100,000. It's a competition you can sign up online on our website. So that's important because, like Lewis said, the city's moving forward, and these things that are happening never would have happened without the recognition that we get. So Lewis, thank you for speaking, sharing your story. I'm sure everyone's going to have way more of a motivated day, as we always do every the last Tuesday of every month. So thank you. I'm sure a couple people might want to meet you. And everyone, thank you for coming. XMI, thank you.
Thank you.
Cool, man.